hot topics. Before we get into the video, I would like to remind you to, if you feel like these videos are helpful to you, become a subscriber and kind of help us along so that we can keep doing videos and bringing you the latest and helping you with existing stuff in some cases. Now, before we get into this video, let's go to page 35 in your code book. Now, I'm going to read 30, say the definition of a dwelling unit with you, but the other sections, we're going to have about 6 illustrations here, so I'm going to do some paraphrasing in this video, but you can go to the section and look it up if you want to just do that on your own and have a little deeper study in the issue of general purpose circuits and the outlets, spacing, and determination of where they should be located is what this video will be about. Now, going over to page 35 in your code book, on the left-hand side of the page at the very top, you pick up a dwelling unit, one family, and of course, you know it's just a building that consists solely of one dwelling unit. A two-family dwelling, which we'll be talking about today too, is a building that contains two or more dwelling units. Now, a multiple family dwelling would have 3 or more, and they're all defined there. Then directly under the dwelling, multiple family dwelling, we find the dwelling unit, and that's what's important to us. A single unit providing complete and independent living facilities for one or more persons, including permanent provisions for living, sleeping, cooking, and sanitation. Now notice permanent cooking, not a microwave or a hot plate or something like that. It's a permanent cooking where you'd have a range, cooktop, oven, that kind of thing, see. So these are the defined definitions of a one family and two family dwelling. Now, with that in mind, we're going to move to the next illustration and get into the presentation of the video. Now let's review this figure 10-6, and basically all it shows is a one-family dwelling and a two-family dwelling. The two-family dwelling consists naturally of two one-family dwellings or residential dwelling, whatever you want to call it. But notice in Article 100, a dwelling unit is defined with permanent provisions for cooking facilities, living area, sleeping area, sanitation areas such as a bathroom. And of course, these are just definitions of a single family and two-family dwelling outlined in Article 100 and defined for the user of the NEC. Now then, let's look at this figure 10-7 that deals with wall receptacle outlets in accordance with NEC 210.52. Now notice the receptacle outlet to the right. It's located at 5 foot 6 inches or less from the finished floor, and it can serve as a required outlet of NEC 210.52. It's item number 4 to 210.52. But notice the wall outlet for the clock. It's over 5 foot 6 inches from the floor, and it's not considered one of the required outlets of 210.52, item 4. And that's what this figure is illustrating, what is considered a wall outlet and what is not. And that's what our figure 210.52 is illustrating to the user of the NEC. Now let's look at this figure 10-8 that's still dealing with wall receptacle outlets, and it's in accordance with the informational note to 210.52. Now notice the door, starting at the left, you would want a receptacle within 6 foot of the doors you see there, and that's usually the inspector will go along with the framing over to the outside of the receptacle. You know you're in good shape, see. And then notice to the right now of the door, you have a 6 foot to the receptacle, and that's in accordance with the informational note to 210.52, as well as the informational note to 424.9 that deals with baseboard heaters. And notice a plug is not allowed to be installed above that baseboard heater without the installation specifications. The manufacturer says so. In other words, the baseboard heater is designed for that type of installation. Or it could be in the baseboard heaters you see. 6 foot to that first plug, 12 foot over to the next plug. Basically what they're saying with this 6 foot, and this is a good rule of thumb for electricians, in the center of the two receptacles you should be within 6 foot to a receptacle to satisfy this rule, and 210.52 is illustrated in this illustration. Now let's take a look at this figure 10-9, and it deals with any room, be bedroom, living room, den, anywhere. But notice when you walk through the door to the right at the bottom of the illustration, well, you measure over 6 foot to a stud and put a receptacle, but you got to put it on a stud that falls within that 6 foot. You got to watch going to the next stud because you'd be over 6 foot in many cases, see. And then you measure along, put one at 12. But here's the whole key. You measure 12 foot for the next one you see, and you see that TV? It's placed right in the center of those two receptacles, and each way you should be within 6 foot to cord and plug connect that TV. And then you move down 12 foot, you set another, and as long as you have wall space, you just keep moving. But notice we have to be within 6 foot of this his closet here. And then when you have 2 foot or more between his and her closet, then you need a receptacle. You'd say, well, what if it's 1 foot? Then you don't need a receptacle, see. So it's a design thing, but remember, it's you have to consider the encasement, the trim out. And then notice after you, her door into her closet, then where it's trimmed out there, and you have to estimate that sometimes, you move down 6 foot and you set a receptacle, and then you're within 6 foot anywhere you set a table lamp, a floor lamp, or whatever it may be. Then you move 6 foot again. And then if for some reason that there's not the wall space, you can't put a receptacle there, then you could put it in the floors you see, but it has to be out at least 18 inches or less to be considered a wall space receptacle in accordance with 210.52A1 through A3. Now you can completely review what we've been going over here on page 68 of the NEC when you review 210.52A1 through A3. Then you notice you have to be within 6 foot of that door, see. So this is your proper spacing of receptacles when you're installing the outlets on the framing members. You got to allow for the finished material now of the wall and the door casing and things like that. You have to include that. And that's what this NEC 210.52A1 through A3 in figure 10-9 is illustrating to the user of the NEC. Now let's review this figure 10-10 from Stallcup's Electrical Design Book, Volume 1. And notice they're talking about wall receptacle outlets in accordance with 210.52A2, Item 3. Notice, again, to the left of the door, the trim out, as you see there, 6 foot, you should have a plug. And if you try to get it on that stud, that would give you 6 foot, but don't move to the next stud, because then you'll be over 6 foot, and most inspectors will reject that. Now notice where you have railings or counters, where you would have space for receptacles. Well, notice 210.52A23 says again, if that railing, you need within 6 foot there, see, you would need to put in a receptacle. And of course, you could do a floor plug too. You could move out, no further than 18 inches and have a floor plug, and that's acceptable to the authority having jurisdiction. But this, you can review this, on page 68, starting with 210.52, and you can look right through A1 and A12 item 3, and you can pick up this rule. And this is in the living room, as you see, where you would have railings or counters, and then you have wall space. So this figure 10-10 is illustrating the NEC 210.52A23, where you deal mainly with railings or counters that would need a receptacle outlet based upon the size and length of them. Now let's review this figure 10-10B. And notice if you had a fixed glass panel, or if that be the case, they're considered wall space. If they're fixed now, they're not movable. And you can't put a receptacle in a glass wall from the ceiling to the floor or halfway down, whatever. But notice you could put a floor plug in, and you would put it within 18 inches. And then you notice if you had a fixed wall, then you would put a receptacle, and then naturally you're going to give that 12-foot measurement again, as you see in this illustration. And the main thing always remember, if you're the electrician making the installation, anywhere that you have two receptacles on the wall or anywhere, you should be within 6 foot in the center of them in any direction. If you don't pick up a receptacle, you're too far. You need to move that outlet box closer, even if you have to have a move into the stud that makes it even closer than 12 foot. That is the rule when you look at 210.52A22 and look at all the requirements of 210.52A1 through A3. Now, sliding doors, as you see in the illustration, then they're not considered wall space. You know, we'd have sliding doors, walk out on the patio or out back or whatever it may, however you're exiting the house. But that's what this figure 10-10B is illustrating to the user of the NEC.